Do you think that HubSpot is the future of sales CRM?
I believe in today's CRM, there's an innovator's dilemma. Most sales tech companies have established their pricing model based on seats, users. The promise of AI is to get rid of the seats. And I've seen it. I've seen how account executives can go away.
Yeah.
You don't have to hire account executives. You don't have to hire support people. You don't have to hire SDRs. I have a bot that will beat them. That would be very worrisome. I definitely think it's the last to go, but like, what if the buyers are bots too? It gets scary. I see so many startups and entrepreneurs who are like, well, we can't remove that segment because it's a lot of our lead volume. That's totally the wrong decision. You might talk to a company that might be in the great industry. You have all the right leads. But if they have like only 3 salespeople and they're super lazy and they never book like appointments and they don't fall through, you're going to get fired.
Right.
Not because of anything your team did. It's just like they're not set up for success.
I've actually personally fucked up in this just recently. Fired out with all the blisters, kind of just going and growing.
It's rare to meet any entrepreneur that hasn't gone through that and like is shaking their head. Oh my gosh, I wish I had done that. Yeah. Michael, you've probably used BANT or something like that. So BANT is budget, authority, need, timing.
We actually don't have BANT, to be honest with you, but then we have this qualification during the business development approach when we determine, does the customer match the success, the case studies we have with them?
So what you've done is world class.
Cool. That was a good approach, you know? So I wanted to start off with a few questions about your time as a CRO at HubSpot, obviously, and I wanted you to kind of take me back to the time you've been with the company. And something just to kind of kick this off, warm up, is I'm curious, when you reflect on the success that HubSpot has now, what were the success factors that actually made HubSpot work, in your opinion?
Well, there's a lot. The first one that comes to mind is probably the team. I just think Brian and Dharmesh did a fantastic job of building out a great team and maintaining a high bar for people to stay there. And so just, it's probably the best executive team I've ever worked with, and like during the time that I was there. And that trickled down to each department, from engineering to product to sales. I used to show my sales team that like it was easier to get into like Harvard Business School than to get into HubSpot. You know what I mean? Like there was just so many applications, and it's also like we ran sort of a major league culture. It wasn't like a cutthroat culture, but it was just like when you think about like a great professional team, they're there to win. But if someone is not like staying at the level that the team needs or demands, then they're not on the team anymore. I would say like a defining moment for that too was when Dharmesh wrote the culture code, which was like something like 120 slide deck. He was inspired by, I think it was Netflix or Amazon or someone like that. Mm-hmm. And it's become a popular strategy, but that really took off. It got millions and millions of views. And some of it was a representation of what HubSpot's culture was, and some of it was aspirational. And it was cool because it attracted people who wanted to work in that culture, and then they joined and they made the culture that way. So if there were any gaps between what was discussed in the culture code and where we were, that gap was shrunk down because that's the culture that people wanted to join.
Right. I love that you mentioned the team first as the main aspect of why the success for HubSpot. When you mentioned that people sticked around and they actually, wanted to work at the place, was it the FOMO thing, or that was more like a gratification, like reward thing? So in terms of like, oh, I just want to lose this amazing company because I won't find something like that, or rather like, hey, I'm making here, there's so much reward here, then I just wanted to go on.
It was more just the mission. Sure, there were people like in the back of their mind thinking like, oh, cool, like we're going to go public, my stock's going to be worth something. But that wasn't discussed a lot, believe it or not. It was just like the mission people believed in.
Yeah. Okay.
And like that just attracted that particular generational talent at that moment. They were like, yeah, this is, I don't know what it was. It was like, maybe they had grown up on social media and they were one of the first generations too. And they were like, holy cow, you can like bring this into business now. So, but a lot of people were just there because like they believe in the company's mission and they love the culture.
Do you think it's possible to build a culture like that now post-COVID, where we work remotely most of the time, if people just prefer to work remotely?
I definitely think culture continues to be just as important. And let's just talk about remote-only companies. So culture still matters a ton. I'm struggling with your words. Build a culture like that. Like I don't think you can replicate it, but I think you have to like reinvent what an exceptional culture means in a remote-only environment. And I don't know, like we actually run Stage 2 Capital completely remote. And I think we got a pretty good culture. One thing that I like to advise folks to do, we kind of did this too, but I've seen like remote workforce, especially sales do, is like whatever meeting cadences you have, cut the meeting length in half and make it twice as frequent, right? So if you used to do like a 2-hour exec kickoff on Mondays, do a 1 hour on Mondays and Thursdays. If you used to do a one-on-one pipeline review every hour a week with a rep, do 2 30 minutes. It's just like, it's a little faster pace. And I miss the physical like energy of everyone being together, but I appreciate the efficiency of work and like not having to sit in traffic for 2 hours a day. And like, I don't know, there's just some good trade-offs there. So I think it's, Michael, I think to summarize, like, you still need to really focus on culture, but I think it's the aspiration of where you want to go is a little different.
I want to pick up on what you just said about that, the fact that you might not be able to replicate what the culture of the HubSpot had before COVID, but now we're kind of past the event and there's still some time to be able to use this remote work to be able to develop cultures that are as great. Will be distinctly different, but we're in that path because it's been several years only. So we don't know whether there's not like as good examples at scale. I mean, obviously we're not talking about GitLab, for example, when you have like 40, 60 people and you work remotely. It's like when you have a gig team, it's not as when you have like 2,000 people working remotely around the world and being like extremely happy about, not f***ing up something or so on and so forth. So just to kind of follow up on that culture book. So everyone has, a lot of people have right now, the culture books, culture code, the values. Now, if you would say, what are the top three things that you can do to implement this culture book effectively? What did you guys do to be able to say, okay, these are the top things that we actually did that impacted the implementation and engagement with the culture code massively?
We required that candidates that were hired were evaluated through that culture code. So there are a list of like 5 or 6 things that we summarized it into, and you had to look at whether you hired an engineer, a salesperson, product, HR, whatever. They had to be looked at through that lens. I think that helped. And further to reinforce it, we did an annual review cycle, and that was also in the annual review. Pretty major component was your supervisor basically rated you and gave qualitative feedback on how you matched up on, each component. I think like when we had major decisions too, we looked at it through that lens, of like, is this, how would you like make this decision to align with the cultural aspiration that we have?
Every great organization has something that stands out for them. Like Zappos had their support team.
Right.
Belkins has our kind of delivery team that is considered to be very cool in the space. Very great results. And like, who or what, in your opinion, stood out for HubSpot to make it work?
I think it evolved, and it almost like evolved almost perfectly. I would take back perfectly, and I'll explain why. In terms of like the stage of the business. So I would say out of the gate, the company was world-class for marketing, right? So like Mike Volpe, our CMO, founding CMO, just like what they did was like amazing. which is creating the category and eating their own cooking to generate all this leads and like just the noise that they've been able to make in the brand they were able to create and the revenue contribution they made, like really rewrote that whole book. I would say second, and like, you know, as humbly as possible, I think sales came after that as like world-class. Like, and I think like what we did differently there was taking an externally data-driven approach to it, bring a lot more science into it, try to get a lot of the squishiness out. You know, it's, there weren't a lot of deals when, you know, this is what, 18 years ago when we started? There weren't a lot of deals done over the phone then. Just the fact that we were calling inbound leads and closing business, taking credit cards over the phone was like, you know, that was revolutionary at the time. And so I think like we had a wave there. And then, yeah, I think everybody admits that like product sort of wasn't great. It wasn't at the same level in the first few years. And then that changed. I would say that probably changed the most when we acquired Performable and their co-founders, David Cancel and Elias Torres. And we became a world-class product organization. That took about 6 years in, right?
Yeah.
And then I think HR has to be commented on at some point in there because they kind of drove some of that culture, and there was some like really like the people organization really innovated. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the evolution. You know, I think it was clearly initially in marketing, then it was like sales became world-class, and then product and CS became world-class, and then people became world-class.
The role of the single individual versus the process of versus the timing or versus something in the success of HubSpot or in the kind of, in those kind of factors that stood out. Was there more an individual who was, hey, because of this CMO, CRO, CEO, we got to where we are, or because we as the team made some good decisions along the road? And again, I mean, throughout the span of the company, not necessarily one single time, right? Because obviously good decisions early on would lead to this, but the role of the team versus the role of the individual in the success.
Yeah, it's a lot more on the team synergy. You know, it's very difficult to point to any individual and say their contribution was like exponentially higher than everybody else. You know, I definitely think like we can compare individuals and there's like, you know, 20 to 30% perhaps variance in impact and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And probably more when you go to the top to all the way to the bottom. But it wasn't like that one person left and everything fell apart, or that person like really drove it. It really was the synergy of the team. And I think like another sort of like anecdotal data point around that is a lot of people have moved on, like, you know, and like any business that's over almost 20 years old, like people get tired and move on and do something else. In some cases, it took them 1 or 2 more tries to get back into something really successful. So I think that speaks to the magic of the team synergy.
Yeah. In Estonia, in Tallinn, when the Skype was headquartered, they have this called Skype Mafia, if you know the thing where
course,
like, the founding team of Skype went out and they did a bunch of projects. Some of them are unicorns, and they basically created the ecosystem. If you were compared to the HubSpot founding team and just generally the C-level and the people you had that initial, or the, you know, the group, kind of backtracking, reflecting, is it similar to Skype Mafia in a way that they did track or?
Yeah, it is. At some point, I think TechCrunch tried to do a little HubSpot Mafia like meme, and I think a lot of people sort of shot it down. I don't think we wanted to be known for that as much. You know, there's definitely people who've gone off and angel invested. I don't think like a lot of folks are necessarily stand out known for that impact wise. I do think that like executives have spun out and helped in a big way create the next wave of Boston's winners. Right? Because like a lot of the staff was in Boston.
Right.
And, you know, like a lot of early executives at Toast, at Drift, at Klaviyo spun out of HubSpot.
Yeah.
So I think some of that magic carried over. And there was a bunch of other spin outs that didn't go. And that's just the game of startups.
Yeah.
And up until then, there weren't a lot of unicorns in Boston. So I think, perhaps there has been some elevation of the Boston tech scene that can be tied back to HubSpot.
It's just for those that are listening, if you are looking for a social mission, then this is a good example of how you can contribute to community, right? Where you can actually be a successful example in your local area, like HubSpot was in Boston, that could kind of spin off some other examples and successes. All right. Mark, what do you appreciate most from your time at HubSpot?
I haven't led a big team since then. And there's a lot of things that were very stressful with any part of that journey. But I would say the thing I miss most about leading is helping people achieve their individual goals. I really like to do that. I did try to up until a certain scale, get to know my team, on a personal level, because I thought it was a good way to motivate them. And I also wanted to understand why they got up in the morning and came to work. And so once a few months had gone by of someone joining the company and kind of shedding themselves of their allegiances to their past employer and really really drinking the Kool-Aid, as they'll call it. I would often have a coffee and beer or whatever with the individual and ask them these questions. What if you hit 200% of your commission this year? What would you do? And you'd hear I'm saving up for a house. I'm saving up for a ring. I'm going to start a family. And it was just really rewarding to see people go do that and probably go achieve those life milestones faster and, more successfully, more happily than had HubSpot not been created. And my favorite one was a gentleman who, I hope he doesn't mind, I've talked about this before, and who had an autistic child. And he basically told me his answer was to get his son into a school that would be better for him.
What kind of leader have you been? Have you been demanding? Have you been strict? Have you been loved by people, feared, respected in a way? If you were to kind of just take me back and say, okay, if I work under you as the CRO, how would I describe you?
Yeah, definitely not fear-based. It was a tremendous amount of discipline rooted in data with a lot of autonomy to go do that in a way that you think is best. So it's kind of like setting a very clear example of what success is on a quarter, a month, a week, and a day. And holding that bar very high, but in a way that's not like, Michael, you suck, step up. It's like, Michael, how can I help you be better? Because that's what the bar is, and that's non-negotiable. But I will stay late and work weekends to help you get better. That was the leader.
What are the top 3 qualities that you kind of appreciate in yourself as a leader that helped you to achieve success, with HubSpot and other success, and then that you would like to see in other leaders that work, under you, with you?
Some of it didn't come that naturally to me. I'm not sure if I was naturally meant to lead. I think I'm a much better mentor than a leader. I know, for example, and I'm a big believer in therapy. I've spoken publicly about that. I'm everyone should be in therapy just to get better. And an area that does not come naturally at all is giving negative feedback. Probably doesn't come naturally to too many people. But you can't be a good leader if you don't do that. I had to make a daily note to give negative feedback at least once a day. Well, people always talk about the quantitative value that I brought to sales. And so I think I can embed and integrate strategy and quant, which was critical for the moment of sales transformation that was going on when I was leading. I had traditionally been a pretty inspirational public speaker, and that helps with a big team to mobilize folks and inspire folks. And while giving negative feedback doesn't come naturally to me, and I had to make a task, giving positive feedback in a correct way, public praise, specificity around it, delivered in a professional way, was something that I did often and I think came naturally to me. I guess I'll throw one more, and there's just a deep amount of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just felt like I've always been able to like quickly and deeply understand an individual. And when you do that, you know whether they should be on your team, and you know how to prescribe a leadership style meant for them.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who you have to give tough love to.
100%.
And there's some people, if you do that, they'll get crushed.
Yeah.
So to adapt that for the individual is key.
Yeah. Like serving leader in a way that you're serving others, interested in others.
I think it's a pretty good summary. I mean, David Cancel was the one that introduced me to that. I think it's pretty good. There's a very high bar here. It's non-negotiable. I'm here to help you get there.
Do you think you did a good job as a CRO at HubSpot? What would you have done differently if you were to do it now, 8-9 years after that?
Well, in the early days, and I see this amongst a lot of early like first time or beginner leaders, is you kind of feel like you need to be the best at everything. And that's what I would have not had as much pressure around in the first couple of years, is that's not your job. Your job is just to build the team and to get the best out of them. You don't have to be the best closer, the best demoer, the best cold caller, you know, the best manager, even like of a sales manager, the best at like running discovery. You have to be the best at your role. And for me, that went from manager 1 year to director to, I was always VP or CRO, the reporting to the CEO. But like when you only have 5 people on the team, like, are you really CRO? You know what I mean? But yeah, when you have 500 people and across multiple continents, then that's really what you think about with being a CRO. Mm-hmm. So you just have to do what's best at that and hope that there's a lot of people around the table who are the best at the other things.
What would you do differently if you were to do it one more time?
I can take that in a couple different ways. This one's probably a little more tactical. I think all of us, looking back on the first few years of HubSpot, and this was just like, I think you can even go beyond HubSpot to any SaaS leader at that time,
right?
Would say that we completely undervalued customer attention and customer value creation. Mm-hmm. And that's something that like I take to all of my companies that I'm on the board of, that I invest in, is a deep perspective on that. The first North Star of the company is not revenue, but customer value creation, which is usually longer term quantified by customer retention. People are often surprised when you go in and diagnose a customer value issue. It actually usually doesn't tie back to the product or onboarding process. It ties back to how it's sold. And so I would have like a myopic focus on that out of the gate if I were to do it again. And I do that. Right. Like when I go in and help the companies that we invest in.
How would that have been changing the way you approach sales or approach the team? What were the first few things that you would change, considering this updated mindset in a way that you will kind of bring on with the experience that you've made?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that works really well that is not well known. You know, it's not talked about across all circles. And I think it will continue, it'll get out there as a general best practice. So the first off is like a lot of effort on the initial ideal customer profile, or ICP definition. We went out trying to sell to everyone. It took us a while to realize that we have to give up, at least temporarily, on certain customer segments, because we're just not going to make them all successful. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs mess that up, you know, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs aspire to raise venture capital and do. And in order to raise venture capital, you have to demonstrate that you're going after $1 billion market. But where they get confused is the entrepreneur thinks they have to prove that in the first year. Mm-hmm. And that's, you're trying to boil the ocean. You're trying to serve everyone. It's not going to work. You have to have the vision. If you want to raise venture capital, which, you know, more wealth is created outside of venture-backed startups, so don't feel like you have to. But if you want to, then you have to aspire to build a multi-billion-dollar business. But you don't have to like prove the market as you go from 0 to 10 million. Just do it the easiest way possible. So that's one thing I would do, is like, okay, we got a big vision, but like, what's the easiest way from a customer market perspective to get to 10 million? Because that's going to take like 2 or 3 years if you're humming.
I've actually personally fucked up in this just recently. So running a service company, like qualifying customers, scoring them, and bringing only the customer that you can deliver success to is the basic thing you do because you don't want to get churn, because your retention revenue is the main driver for your growth. The new revenue is very expensive.
Yes.
So that's the first thing we did. But then we made the profit and then reinvested our profit in our SaaS, and they just fired out with all the blisters kind of just going and growing. We went to like 1 million or something, and then we stopped like plateaus because the churn was higher than acquisition and this whole thing. And then we went back to the drawing board and said like, hold on, what are the ICP? What are the target? But the reason that you know, we reinvest our own profit, every dollar we made, we didn't have the fear of like, okay, we raised capital, et cetera, et cetera. But now going through that exercise and actually completing it and say, okay, we actually are selling to enterprises. We actually need to change this product. We actually need to change this. Oh, okay, let's do that. And now we are ready to raise. And this is actually to support, like, I loved one of your speech. I think it was either Suster or one of your lectures about the fact that most Series A, Series B, Series C companies fail like 70%. And the reason is that they didn't do that initial,
at every stage,
that initial thing that you can do when you're bootstrapping. And that's just the message to everyone that, hey, try to bootstrap for a few years before raising, right?
Yeah. So that's great, Michael. Thank you for sharing that. And it's rare to meet any entrepreneur that hasn't gone through that and like is shaking their head. Oh my gosh, I wish I had done that. Yeah. And so like, it's even funny because I get concerned when I'm like working with a startup and now a year has gone by and whatever, they've signed up like 40 or 50 customers. If they haven't like relabeled any of them as non-ICP, it's almost like unheard of to like start selling with no customers and like, okay, here's our hypothetical ICP. In fact, I'm okay with like being a little broad in the first dozen, but then as we learn and be like, ooh, like we got to start like moving them out of the ICP. Sometimes you call it firing a customer, but other times you can just kind of like put it aside in a little bit of a less attentive way. So that is critical. And we didn't do that soon enough. Over time at HubSpot, we eventually, like, for example, about 2 years in, we stopped selling to companies with between 1 and 5 employees. And that was 40% of our lead volume. People were shocked by that. And like, I see so many startups and entrepreneurs who are like, well, we can't remove that segment because it's a lot of our lead volume. That's totally the wrong decision. That you're trying to like make a segment work just because there's lots of leads there. Like you don't choose a segment based on CAC,
right?
And easy to close rate. You choose a segment by LTV,
and retention,
which is most correlated to retention and expansion, right? So that's like the number one. Number two is, and this is very tactical and works very well. And that is to have a customer success qualifying matrix. A lot of sales teams have a qualifying matrix. Michael, you've probably used BANT or MEDIC or something like that. So BANT is budget, authority, need, timing. MEDIC is metrics, economic buyer, decision maker, decision process, identify pain, champion. We use GPCT at HubSpot, which is goal, plan, challenge, timeline. These are all like acronyms or whatever that is almost like a cheat sheet for the salesperson and manager to be able to evaluate how likely a prospect is to buy. Those are very well known for decades.
100%.
But you need a sister one to tell a cheat sheet to tell you if the customer is going to succeed with you, right? So like common ones that are in there are like, how are they defining success? Did the IT team sign off on this? Are the end users bought in? Like I can close a deal without having IT bought in, without the end users being bought in, and with the customer having a completely unrealistic vision of what success is with our product. Like HubSpot, you're going to triple your leads in a week. Done. They're churned.
Let me give an example.
So go ahead.
No, I was saying that it's a great example, and it's also something that a lot of professional service companies like us are doing. Just because, so the way we work is we use this plan hat. So we use HubSpot for sales, and we use Plan Hat for customer management. And in that customer management tool, we have this North Star metric, which is SDR KPI per customer. So essentially, this is something that we guarantee by the contract. This is something the customer looks at every month. And based on that, we have dashboards. And what we do is say, okay, these are the top 10 industries that we have the higher SDR score for. Then we have, these are the industries that make us the higher LTV and the lower churn. And these are the industries that leave us more clutch reviews and testimonials and video reviews. We also have that metric. So what are the industries that actually can refer more businesses for us that are more active? And then we send it to the sales team and marketing team and say, hey guys, this is the only customer we are interested in right now, because if you are not within this ballpark, then we cannot deliver. Yes. If we cannot deliver, it means that we are burning through people, we are not successful with them, and it's not going to work. So in this way, the sales team is committed to bringing all of those customers. And then you have this, we actually don't have band, to be honest with you. Maybe as a head of sales, I didn't do it early on. But so we currently have 500, 600 new opportunities entering the pipeline. So I have a significant sales team in the professional services, to be honest with you. But then we have this qualification during the business development approach when we determine, does the customer match the success, the case studies we have with them? We are sort of like qualifying them based on the success likelihood of winning the business for them rather than based on their budget or their need. And in this way, we're selling only to those that we know we can deliver and we can bring on this huge experience. And then obviously when you have this ton of success with the guarantees and good deals for the customer, then they would like, hell yeah, let's do that. There's no even way to determine, especially when you're selling to inbound, right? So
no, that's a great example, Michael. And I think like it's a gray area as to whether that's ICP or qualifying success, customer success qualifying matrix. Cause like you're helping me like work it through. Like if you can tell that about the customer before you talk to them, probably should go into ICP, right? Because that's just like segmenting folks out. Versus if you have to talk to them or there's something that you have to do in the sales process that is malleable, then that would go into, so for your team, I would guess like, you know, there has to be some level of competence of the account executives that you're going to send the appointments to for this to make sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you might talk to a company that might be in the great industry and you have all the right leads. But if they have like only 3 salespeople and they're super lazy and they never book like appointments and they don't follow through, you're going to get fired.
Right.
Not because of anything your team did. It's just like they're not set up for success. So that might be an example. And these things, like for folks that are listening, as you go through your 360 reviews on like on churns that happened in the last quarter, you can try to get an honest diagnosis, and some of those are going to come back to, we should have never sold that deal. And those specific, assessments will lead you to your customer success qualifying matrix.
Yeah.
It's not like Bent where it's like universal.
Yeah.
It's very personal to your business.
When we are losing customers, we have a benchmark of like 60% churn. We're like, okay, we need to pioneer the industry. If we have 60% churn, we're like 3 times better than any other agencies. So we're going to grow faster, we're going to be more healthier. And this 6% clients that we churn, every client is analyzed. So it's like, okay, why did we lose this customer? And very often these are because of the criteria, because with our offering, we went to upmarket and customers still were lived in that smaller segment when the churn reasons might be something like, oh, we're, decided to close down the shop, or we decided to do this and this and this, and then just tell us, oh, hold on, are we actually going for the right criteria for our acquisition team? But then we did that only after analyzing the churn, right? Just to your point that this kind of success metrics criteria and actually working with not with the market TAM and like ICP and how we can acquire, but going from that at another end and just working through your customers. And this is just kind of to support your point that
That's a great example. That's a great example. And so and then the last one, Michael, I got to get to it because it's like even the more impactful. It's the most impactful one.
Tell me.
So far you got tight ICP, customer success qualifying matrix, the sister to your buyer qualifying matrix.
Right.
And the third one's sales compensation design. We're still using sales comp plans from the 80s. And you have to know, especially in our world of B2B software,
right?
It was always like whoever got the deal, the best companies had the best sales teams. Like, it's just like, once you sold them the software, they couldn't get out of it. They bought 50 servers in the basement. They spent 6 months having Accenture deploy it. They spent another 6 months having extension run change management. The software sucked. That's why it's called shelfware back then. And you were stuck with it. But now it's like you're in the cloud world, you're in SaaS, retention's a big deal. And we're still paying our reps like it's shelfware. We're paying our reps a ton of money for the contract without any alignment around the customer success. Now, like I've seen some people try to pay them like, we're going to pay you 5% every month for when the customer pays. That's not a good design.
That's very bad.
Because what you have is like reps
they're going to
selling every quarter.
100%.
They can go to the beach and make money.
Yes.
There's no motivation to work.
That's true.
And furthermore, like a rep psychologically needs to feel, when they have a good quarter, they need to feel it in their paycheck that quarter. And when they have a bad quarter, they need to feel it in their paycheck that quarter.
Yeah.
So it needs to be a little like short-lived. So this is where it comes down to the definition of a leading indicator of retention, which has a broader implication on your business than just sales comp. But because of our chat right now, we'll just leave it at sales comp. So this is basically some sort of customer behavior that surfaces in the first month of them being in business with you. That if this behavior occurs, they'll be with you forever. And if it doesn't occur, they're a major churn risk.
Yeah.
So we're talking a lot about HubSpot. We figured out what HubSpot's was statistically 3 years in. And it was if the companies used 5 of our features. So we had 25 features in the platform: email, analytics, market innovation, blogging, SEO, whatever. If they use 5, 98% retention rate. If they use less than 5, it got down to like 60%. So that's the comp plan.
That's great.
When you close a customer, I'm going to give you half of your compensation when they sign the contract and half when they hit the leading indicator of retention. In this case, use 5 features. Slack's leading indicator of retention was 2,000 team messages. So Slack, hey, good job, Michael, close the deal. I give you half when they sign and half when they send their 2,000 team message. No, not a lot of people do it. Works wonderfully.
Yeah. Do you have anywhere written that in detail, like describe all that in detail?
Yeah, in the science of scaling. If you Google Mark Roberge science of scaling, it's like a latest work that I have that basically stage 2 capital's methodologies on, and you can search through there for compensation design.
I'm curious to share with you. I recently wrote in my newsletter the details of how we build our comp structure, and it's very similar to what the engineers are doing with levels. So we implemented 9 levels of sales from like level 1 to junior to level 7, like head of sales. And then there is competencies every level, and there is like and then there's these metrics where you need not just quantitative but qualitative metrics, and they tied to the increase in the percentage and increase in this, and then these levels are reevaluated every 3-6 months. And then these are not just about the direct contribution, but also the team contribution, the product development, and some other things to have the drafts committed. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So I'll message you the link to that newsletter if you can.
Yeah, please do. World class.
I love that.
World class. I mean, I have it is like chapter 11 in the sales acceleration formula, I think, around promotion tiers. I use that exceptionally well. And I find, especially in your business, Michael, where you're moving more to the SDRs and BDRs, that is critical. And they need to move fast. And they're so motivating. So what you've done is world class.
All right. So one last question on the HubSpot section. Do you think that HubSpot is the future of sales CRM?
I'm an advisor to the company, in full disclosure. I'm also a venture capitalist that needs to think a lot about tech and AI's impact. I'll leave HubSpot aside because I do think they have an opportunity to seize it. But I do believe that if we just generalize like CRMs or sales tech. Okay, let's just talk about that. I do think that category is at massive risk of innovator's dilemma and disruption, like in 2000 when the cloud came out. If you've read Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, he's evaluated major tech disruptions over multiple decades to try to codify why these things occur. And there's a lot of different ways to describe it, but essentially what happens is the disruption is so large that it's expensive for the incumbent to migrate to it. And oftentimes it's so large that there's not a big market in the beginning because the users aren't ready. And so if we look at the cloud in 1995, I believe 80% of the CRM market was owned by Siebel and act. Raise your hand if you're a listener right now and you use Siebel or act. Okay, so like case in point,
I wasn't
right?
born there.
I mean, there's no one's, I don't know, not a lot of people are using this. Because what happened? Like, Siebel was sitting around and they're crushing. And they're like, okay, well, there's this thing coming called the internet and cloud, and let's hire some consultants to say what we should do. And the consultants went out probably, and they were like, it's going to cost you $1 billion to re-platform on the cloud. So it's expensive. And there's no market. We interviewed 50 CTOs and none of them said they would ever put their data in the cloud. So there's no market opportunity. And Benioff goes off and starts Salesforce, and he makes hay initially in the SMB segment. And then by the time the early 2000s happened and we got through the early adopter stage of the cloud, and the CTOs realized they had to get comfortable with this and it was actually safe and it brought a lot of cost savings.
Yeah.
Salesforce was there to catch the market and Siebel couldn't catch up. There was an innovator's dilemma. I believe in today's CRM, there's an innovator's dilemma. It's different with AI. Most sales tech companies have established their pricing model based on seats, users. The promise of AI is to get rid of the seats. Now, I can speak separately about like capitalistic greed and stuff like that, but it's just like a reality of the technology.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I've seen how account executives like can go away.
Yeah.
I don't think the current CRM incumbents can afford to go after that because it's so disruptive to their model. And I think there's a new wave of CRMs that is built, or technology that is built to get rid of the seats. So I think it's a really crazy time for sales tech. You bring it back to HubSpot, the team's smart. They understand innovator's dilemma. Will it hurt them or can they catch it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard for the incumbents.
I will attach the description on YouTube of this video, your speech on SaaStr, where you actually spoke in detail about this dilemma, just for people to see the more expanded version of this point. But I agree with you. And it's, from the outsider like myself, who is obviously a huge fan of HubSpot, I've done some amazing things with this technology in my team. Very efficient. The team is like, just love it. Obviously, like the natural progression is, Salesforce, as you mentioned, started with small businesses, went up market. HubSpot is trying to go up market, and there are some other companies that are kind of they're going, to the up market space. And the nature is that there will be someone else, underdog, coming out and disrupting that. And that's what we did with our competitor. There was this competitor, Company Science, back in the day that I'm grateful for, like actually kind of leading us to the road of like and learning and creating the category that we basically beat to the ground just because they couldn't handle the volume at their scale. There were leads, and so now we are underdog. But I have a feeling that there will be a new company coming in after us, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, where we with our size will be too monolithic, too slow to be able to do anything about it, right? So I'm curious to do you have any? And again, not as an investor, not as an advisor, just it's discreetly off the record between us and the listeners of this podcast. Like when you analyze like the nature. So do you think that Salesforce can show the innovation with whatever they have, or they would be this protected unknown giant for the Zoomers like myself that never tried, never want to try, never want even to go in that direction? Because I'm comfortable with HubSpot, and then HubSpot losing the momentum, and then how many years we have in that sort of like chase.
Yeah. I think if it's kind of like a copycat Me Too attacker from below on the existing workflow, I think it might, but I don't think it would happen. I know it happened with Salesforce to some degree because they just prioritized, at least in the final years of my tenure at HubSpot, where I was closer to these deals. They were just really prioritizing like the Ford Motors of the world. That was just where all the money was with all the contacts and everything. And I don't know if they like just deprioritized or took their eye on the ball or whatever on the SMB. It probably wasn't as high of a performing, profitable business for them. And HubSpot, because we weren't like as outbound, as event driven, we were very inbound. Our CAC was low And that allowed us to create a pricing model and a business model that worked for the SMB. And we stayed there for a long time. Like Brian and Dharmesh made us stay there, and it was the right call for a long time. And now, again, I'm a little distant from the operations day, and there's probably efforts to go upstream, et cetera, whatever. And I just don't know like what their strategy is to defend the SMB still, but I think that's very possible to do that. Now, when it comes to the disruptive cycle of like, you know, an attacker from below who's like, you don't have to hire account executives. You don't have to hire support people. You don't have to hire SDRs. I have a bot that will beat them. That would be very worrisome. And not that like, even if they could get their hands on the technology and it was apples to apples, I just don't understand what they would do. Like if a CRM company is charging a big business $2 million a year for the 700 salespeople, even if they like had the same technology, the attacker's not going to have to charge them $2 million a year for the AE bots. I don't know what they're going to do. Do you?
So actually that brings me to my next point. Something done authentically by human versus AI. I have an idea that it would actually differentiate the industry leaders from the rest, where the former would be really on human than AI. So the question is here, like you mentioned, that maybe the industry leaders like HubSpot would actually use the human aspect of the things as differentiator versus those that wanted to use the AI and the automation. And that could be the, hey, we're the real deal, and then you guys are like bots.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there are going to be some there are already regulations to like around a lot of this stuff. I used to be really most bullish that like the SDR role would be the first to be automated, but because of the robocall legislation, like I don't think it will. Because you can do it with an inbound lead or an opted-in lead, but most people don't have a lot of those. Yeah, you could possibly. I just think like it gets relatively commoditized fast. If we're gonna like just break down that experience of that AI rep, there's like the visual representation, there's the human dialect voice synthesis, and then there's like the mind, like the LLM in a way of like you say something, they say something. There's like, I think those are three components. I've looked at stuff that integrates all three, and it seems like the video, and I'm not, take it with a grain of salt, I'm not like deep in this technology from a technical standpoint, more from a commercialization standpoint, but like the video, from what I hear, the video part is relatively commoditized and will become. The voice synthesis part is relatively commoditized and will become. You know, with Meta and Apple working on open source versions of the LLM, like I just wonder if a lot of that would be too. I think where the differentiation would be the specialization on top of the generic LLM for the use case that you're doing. And it's more about like when you and I are coaching a rep on a discovery call. Like it isn't their voice and dialect that really makes the difference. It isn't how they look. There's a little bit, but like it really is like the execution of listening and responding and how you navigate that. I think whoever comes up with the best one of those will take the market. And that will be an iterative competition.
What about upstream? So it's like, I agree with you 100% with the fact that small to mid-size, automated, scale, huge TAM.
Yeah, that's the first one.
But then like, when you go up market, let's say, and this is something that I'm personally curious from the professional service standpoint, the industry that I'm in, is that I have this feeling that if you wanted to be authentic and you wanted to use human and you need to push for the quality, level up, and then just go up market, because there will be industry leaders like HubSpot that wanted to charge, you can charge for premium work, because this is something they would say, hey, this is authentic piece of content, the journalistic work, very deep, it's not AI. And we're ready to pay for that. Do you think there's some truth in this?
I definitely think it's a last to go. But like, what if the buyers are bots too? I mean, you just think about it. It's like, okay, I'm the head of operations at Novartis, a drug company. And I'm going to go buy our new CRM. Can't AI do that better? Can't AI go out and evaluate the needs of the organization, develop an awesome RFP, and go out and assess the vendors better than a human eventually?
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to conceptualize it, but like I think it can. I mean, I think what you're poking at is there's still a comfort around having a human involved. But I just bought a car last month and I bought it on my phone. I didn't it was delivered to my house, right? So I think we're getting pretty comfortable with that.
But then the decisions you made, not you didn't program. Imagine
that's
you
true.
Saying that
that's
hey,
true. But I could
buy a car based on my preference, and then you have like a yellow Toyota, and you're like,
oh. yeah, exactly. Yeah,
all right.
But the point was, it was a relatively large a large purchase that there was no component of my trust in the salesperson to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Did you follow the new Google update for the search that they wanted to ban the backlinks, the BPNs, the AI-generated content, and they will prioritize the authentic content, the engagements, and so on and so forth?
A little bit. I didn't read too deeply about it, but I was maybe you can bring me up to speed and I'll talk to you with you about it, because I was just we actually came out with our own chat bot, chat.stage2capital.com. And our aspiration, we've taken our content and we've taken the content of people that we think write great startup content to train this thing to serve the founders with their go-to-market questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering why our marketer couldn't just run a question every minute and then publish that answer as a blog post. And something doesn't add up there. So I believe it's in that vein. By the way, we just launched it 2 days ago. It's chat.stage2.capital. I don't know if we can somehow
we can promote it. We can,
but there's no .com. But that's what that's what I was most interested in. I mean, they've always been working on getting better backlinks and stuff. And Google's always been fantastic at authenticity. But how they're keeping out chat generated, OpenAI generated content, that's cool.
Yeah, but I don't know the engine specifics. What I know from the business standpoint is we've invested we've done 3-4 years, probably $500,000 into creating content. We used low quality volume interlinks. So we did this programmatic SEO type of organic, top of the funnel content. We generated some views, some views, some visits, no real deal, no deals, whatever. We changed the strategy for 1 year, bottom of the funnel content, high quality, $2,000 CPs, journalistic work, interviews, IP, authenticity, rank within 30 days, first page of the Google, generate deals, organic traffic, 100, 200 deals from blog, even in 2024. The difference was that we flipped the switch from hey, let's work with Google as the algorithm into, hey, we're this cool company that does a really cool shit. Let's work to how we can package that from the journalist, from the authenticity standpoint, where we can actually provide the value for the customers and not just, drag the SEO. And this recent update that Google sort of support that kind of strategy was a good surprise for me. Then it was that was a good approach, because I was also afraid of the fact that with even Google having their own BART, AI, with how they would track, how this. But I think that there's a lot of smart people working there, and I think they would protect the two camps. The camp that say, hey, let's focus on authenticity rather than hey, let's just do a lot of AI. And this actually to the next point. I've had a call with a company that do the AI, as you mentioned, AI SDR, AI caller, who is trained based on the calls that the organization had made to mimic. And then you use that both with authenticity to call the list. When I was pitched this idea, I was super scared. I was people can influence the psychology of and doing imagine doing the different servers and doing 1 million calls a year, a day for people. It's do you think that this type of stuff should be regulated, heavily regulated?
Well, I think it should be regulated first and foremost because you can replicate a president and say stuff.
Right.
So we need, there's some safety and security things, going on. If today it takes I don't even know, I'm not going to do the math accurately here, but if it takes like a team of 50 SDRs to generate 1 million outbound calls over a quarter, and it costs the organization, $1 million or $2 million to do that, would it be good to allow technology to do that in an hour? Now, of course, like that would create an overflow of like noise.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
But I don't know if that like...
It will kill the channel.
Yeah, it would. Because it would just like clog up your phone.
Yeah, it will be a different phone number. So you'll have like a personal secured phone number that won't be accepting the external calls, and you'll be doing messengers to contact people. That's it.
Yeah, it's like, do we regulate out of the behavior, or do we help the consumer block it out? Either way, it's going to lead to the destruction of that lead gen channel.
People compare it with email. So it's like, hey, what about email?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But then being on the front line of the email capability, working with Google on that as well, it's like there are always new updates. Like there's this new Beamy thing opened up, like whether you need to have a verification mark for your domain when you are trademarked. There's some other things. They're always like, so at the end of the day, we're still using email as a channel, right? It's still good. Like cold email still works very well, and it's very effective. So they did a good job sort of like controlling that. But I remember back in the day, like 7-8 years ago, anyone can run an outreach. And now try to build a cold email sequence and make it work. If you didn't have experience doing
Much
that.
harder.
Impossible. Yeah. It's like so many nuances, so many small details, so many things that you need to know about that. All right, myth or truth? The popularity of professional services is raising more than SaaS. 2024. I saw a lot from people in my network. There's a lot of consulting work, a lot of freelance work, a lot of people work remotely. Yeah. The workspace as it has changed.
Oh, I see what you mean. The gig economy.
The gig economy. So now you're like, I'm a professional service.
Okay. I absolutely see that a rise in that. And it was funny because when the internet came out, they were predicting that like 20 years ago. I never really, but yeah, I definitely see a lot of people having like, in a way, multiple jobs, and they're like filling these, and they're not, less people are like, the 40-hour a week, I work for one company, etc. I get that.
Did you hear about the Design Joy? I don't advertise them here, but basically what this guy did, he called it a design agency with a twist. So what his business model is, he built Trello integration, and he puts like a frictional design work for companies that they can sign up for, and they can pay like a fixed like 2K or 3K. And then what he does one assignment, and there's like a backlog, so he can do one assignment at a time. So what he did, he got like 12 customers or like 20 customers, each paying X. So now he's making $120,000 being a only designer in the company and working with customers. Yeah. No calls, no chats, just Trello and just doing a good work.
Perfect. Yes.
And he runs the business.
Definitely see
and
things
he's
going
a service business,
Absolutely.
Productized service company, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I was just seeing a lot of those happening, and I'm actually the reason I started Belkins in the first place was the fact that I was 22 years old. I had zero savings. I didn't graduate the Ivy League. I have zero connections, zero investors. I was just this guy from Ukraine that had nothing. Imagine me raising capital for the idea. Like it would be like they like blow the shot. So what I did, I started the business. I learned the grids. I built the name, built the business, and now it's like, okay, now I know things, so I can play around with tech, play around with like, just build it, start the business. But that was like 7 years of like grind and actually learning how to run the company, run the business, and the value of money. And something that, again, you as an investor can, and this actually brings me to my next point, entrepreneurs now versus 10 years ago. Do you think that some of the Gen Zs of my generation, we kind of played a bit in this entrepreneur journey when we were submitting to YCs and tech crunches and Techstars and stuff, and just pitching with the presentation, and then, as you said, like failing at the 90% rate and pitching the same ideas and just going and raising and angels and stuff instead of actually building businesses? One of my guests in this podcast says this called conscious business, where you can actually create jobs and sort of like build the value and the assets, and then sort of like work an investor. What's your just point?
Sure. Yeah. First off, like, congratulations on what you've done. I mean, it's impressive. I don't know if it's egotistical to call it the American dream, but the fact that you were able to go out and have that grit is amazing. You can study the availability of angel and venture capital, right? And we definitely were in a major surplus in 2020 and 2021, which is not good for the ecosystem because businesses that shouldn't have gotten funded get funded. Businesses that are good get funded at a valuation that's too high. And then the outcome of that is they turn a good business into bad because they get desperate to grow into that valuation. And then, vintages of venture capital years don't have good returns. So it's really bad for the ecosystem. And it's a tough asset class because the lag time is so long. When you put money into a stock, you can hold it for a week, a month, 6 months, 2 years, whatever, you choose. But then it takes 8 to 10 years for you to understand in venture capital how that investment class is doing. The reaction of the market in 2020 was a result of a very healthy early stage startup ecosystem in 2012 and 2013.
Okay.
Right. And so because a lot of you look at venture capital vintages, which is the year the money was invested, some of the best vintages happen in the years right after a collapse. After the 2001 collapse, you got 2002. And then by the time you get to 2003, 2004, those become better vintages.
Mm-hmm.
You had the 2008 class, 2009, 2010, 2011, they become better vintages. And it makes sense because there's not a lot of money out there. People are tight to their wallet. It's a depressed economy. And so there's less competition for deals. So as a VC, you get a good deal. And it's a great time to build a business because there's a lot of talent out there. You couldn't hire a CRO in 2020.
Right.
Now I talked to 3 CROs that are out of work today.
And they do frictional CRO, probably.
Yeah, exactly. You do fractional too. Exactly. So I think getting back to your question, there's definitely and it wasn't just 2020 and 2021 were the extreme, but the surround sound of that, 2018 leading up to it, the entrepreneurs were spoiled. It was easier to get money than it ever had been. You could argue that we've just become more entrepreneurial, society. Maybe there's some justification to that. Factually speaking, I think the average tenure for a Fortune 500 company in the 70s was something like 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's 15.
Wow.
So disruption happens faster, who are Google, Amazon, Meta. These are 3 of the top 5 most valuable businesses in the world. And they weren't even in business 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's but I think it went too fast. And now you're seeing a different time where I think this vintage now is going to be really strong. But who knows what happens, right? We have a lot of geopolitics
100%.
happening that could lead to another depressed economy. So assuming that we're sort of at the trough, let's knock on wood, then this year, next year, whatever, will be very good VC vintages. But people won't know for 5 years, and that's when they'll put their money back in. And now it's too late.
Right.
It's kind of like when your grandmother asks, should I put money in the stock market? I heard it's doing really good. That's when you should not put money in the stock market. No offense to grandma.
All right. So another myth or truth, cost of development is lower than ever. Cost of acquisition is higher than ever.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. I think it's really hard to pick your head out of the day-to-day and adopt something like AI, and we're pushing our portfolio to. That is in terms of engineering and R&D, that's the area where I'm seeing a lot of progress of adopting. So yes. And then a whole bunch of other things like open source availability and just the DevOps continuing to do great, infrastructure continuing to do great, to provide tools and efficiency. And then, acquisitions way up. I think part of it is because a combination of like, we were a little bit spoiled as salespeople in the last couple of years because the economy is roaring. And part of it's because like we were in a little bit of a recession here. Like a lot of people were on cuts.
Yeah.
So cost of acquisition is up.
And then I think final question is like a random one, but curious to hear your thoughts. We already kind of touched base on some regulations, but like, you being, in front of all the companies we have, again, for people listening to this, for Stage 2 Capital, you have over several hundred LPs that are tech entrepreneurs. Yeah. How many?
Yeah. 500.
500.
So
right?
Our secret sauce is like
Yeah.
backed by the go-to-market leaders, the CRO, CMO of Snowflake, Datadog, Zoom, etc.
Yeah. So you obviously, talk about this behind the closed door probably, but what's your take on control of monopolies? Generally like what's happening with like what Congress is doing in terms of the privacy data, but generally on the monopoly of the tech, like we have Amazon, you mentioned Meta, some other guys. Do you agree that it should be governed, restricted, and generally should be like a policeman saying like a tough hand, or we should be in the dystopian Blade Runner 2030 where corporations are ruling the world?
Yeah. I'm on the fence. I don't really have like a lot of conviction either way, nor do I think about it too much. And I don't talk about much behind closed doors, Michael, just so you know. I'm a relatively transparent person. I just think that goes a long way, catches up with you if you don't. So yeah, I haven't thought too much about it. On one hand, it's just like, it's a necessity of a strong capitalist economy is to have good competition. So you have to.
Mm-hmm.
I would hate to do that job. I think it would be quite boring to like decide when something's too big and force it to split up. And it's almost like there's a part of me that feels bad too, because it's like they worked really hard. So like, and they outmaneuvered everyone in the game. That's just too bad that like it gets broken up. So I'm kind of torn on it. It's like, I know it's a necessity for the health of the economy. And when they do get broken up, it makes my job easier as a startup person and investor. But at the same time, I kind of feel bad because it's like they did an awesome job. Of course, like if they start exploiting the consumer, then, or like the society, then I don't feel bad. I think like Amazon's creating a lot of value for people.
100%. But then the question is, enough is enough. So it's like, if you are controlling the retail and e-commerce, let's say you have the best delivery, the best data, the best prices, the best products, everything, there's no way I can compete against you.
I know. And especially with like data has always been king in the last 15 years. And with the advent of AI, it exponentially goes up. It gets scary, you know? And I don't know, like, again, I'm not an expert in this. Like, I think most folks would not necessarily complain about Amazon and like how if they abuse that power. I don't know. Like, I think people like Prime, they like fast delivery, they like shopping 100%. There, they trust the reviews.
Yeah.
Has Meta failed at times? Yeah. They admit that.
Thank you so much, Mark. We had to go deep, starting with HubSpot and then going to here. Mark, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on my show.
Thanks, Michael.